Hi, I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Dear Moon to Moon, it's Britton, and it is my delight and my pride to share with you this conversation celebrating the spirit and the heart of astrologer and love devotee mystic Suprasensory Shahir. Shahir was on Moon to Moon in the Unshaming the Houses series. Shahir was my guest for Unshaming the Third House. So you may know Shahir from that episode. And you also may know Shahir because you follow their work and maybe you're one of Shahir's clients. Maybe you've studied with Shahir. Maybe you enjoy learning with them on Instagram. So this year, as you may already know, Shahir is one of the 3 13th readers in the 2025 Magician's Table. The Magician's Table is a learning container, an experiential space, and a cauldron where I gather together magical human beings who want to get really real with their magic, who are willing to reconstitute themselves in community with one another in honor of their magic. Every year, the Magician's Table shifts a bit, changes come in, there's differing frequencies. And a lot of this depends on who the 13th readers are that year. The 13th readers are the leaders of the space. Each cohort of the Magician's Table always has 12 magicians. So the 13th reader is the 13th human, magical person, mystic, creator, artist in the cohort for that particular cohort group. And it is my feeling that the individuals that constellate to each cohort are being constellated for a variety of reasons. One, they're constellated towards my voice. 2, more powerfully, they're being called by the being of the Magician's Table. It feels this way to be true. They're being constellated because there's something gathering so that they can meet the other humans that are in their cohort. And they are being gathered to specifically experience the leadership of the 13th reader of their cohort. So the human that I invite in to play this role each year is one of the most important decisions that I make for the Magician's Table in any year. It really sets the field into place, and then the frequency can then constellate from there. So the truth is that I've been wanting to invite Shahir since the second year. In the first year, I had one 13th reader. That's Jonathan Coe, who many listeners know. Jonathan hosts the podcast Healing the Spirit. And then after that, Shahir was always in my field as a voice I was hearing. I was hearing the name Shahir, because I've known Shahir a long time now, for this role. And the way it works for me is that there are many names I actually am always hearing for these roles, but it's my job, it's my leadership job to be attuned to, is it this year? Is this the year for the names that I hear for this role? Because I do hear a lot of names. And I see their faces, like they just kind of come in. And so this was the year that it was like, this is the year I'm going to ask Shahir. I just knew. I've known, honestly, that I was going to invite Shahir since probably August. So I then sit with this choice for a long time to just let my body move through lunar cycles, like move through emotional experiences, and just allow myself to completely root into the yes. But for all 3 13th readers that I invited this year, I've really known since summer, but I just took all of autumn to cycle through the possible phases where things might shift. That did not happen. I could have invited them all last August, and I invited them last month after I had a chance to root into this choice. So I'm so grateful that Shahir said, yes, you will hear from Shahir the incredible wisdom that this human being has as like a natural connection to their mystic's wisdom. You will hear their huge spirit, this incredible spirit that is what love feels like. So it's so beautiful, and it's so, it feels so right that Shahir named themselves a love devotee. Now, if you listen to my last episode, you will know that the theme that I'm naming for this year's Magician's Table is the devotions that are driving us, the devotions that's driving you. I'm really calling in this year individuals who like feel this motor, like feel this propelling energy. You may feel it coming from behind you, like a force that's driving you forward from behind, and you're just like, trying to keep up with the energy of being chased by this passion energy. For me, I see like the picture of Caradwyn running after Gwion, who had sipped some of her precious cauldron without her consent. And then they began to have this chase where with his now magical powers, he turns into different animals, and then she likewise transforms into other animals to keep chasing after him. So he has to stay agile and he has to keep going, and it's like this driving energy that's forcing him to keep mutating and to keep discovering what he can do and who he can be. Right? Like sometimes when the devotion's driving us, it feels like it's chasing us from behind, right? And sometimes the devotion that's driving us feels like it's like a lantern out in front of us. It's like, and it's like what we're pointing our archer's arrow toward, and we're moving toward it and we're trying to reach it. And the whole experience is not really about tackling the thing down and holding it still. It's the joy of the experience of being led by this light, this lantern, this something, and we're following it, and we're going through experiences with it, and we're on a quest with it, and we meet all different kinds of human beings while we're on this journey, and we don't know what's around the corner or where it's going to take us next, but we can't turn away. We have to keep following this. That's what I'm talking about. The devotion that's driving us. This is the vibe for Magician's Table 2025, on shaming this experience of being a little bit out of control, because the spirit of this devotion, it's like it has its own animated life force, and we're in a game of chase with it. So how beautiful that for Shahir, this is a love devotion. This is a love devotion. And we talk about that towards the beginning of our conversation. And we talk a lot about the mystic's life, the mystic's process of being an astrologer, a diviner, a space holder for others. And, you know, really having to tune in to like, what overculture says timing should be? What overculture says this or that should look like as a business owner? And what feels right in my body as a mystic in my own mystical space? So the title of this episode comes from something Shahir was speaking to about staying in your circle, staying in your own mystical, magical circle, where you're tuned in to what you need as a mystic, and trusting that all of your clients and colleagues are also in their own mystical circles. And then in the validation and the respect for this, we offer one another sacred sovereignty. So proud of this conversation. I'm so proud to be collaborating with Shahir. We're going to be working together very closely for these months ahead. My spirit is very excited about this, my own spirit. Shahir is someone who I trust as a diviner in my own life. You know, like it's like a big thing to trust someone to divine for and with you, you know, and I really trust Shahir. I'm so excited for you to enjoy this conversation. Thank you, Shahir, for spending time with me. Thank you for saying yes to my invitation to come play in the field that is Magician's Table this year. I can't wait to see who constellates around you. I'm going to read your bio now, and then I will invite all of us to enjoy this episode. So Suprasensory Shahir, they, them, is a love devotee mystic, a queer Muslim astrologer currently based in their motherland in Southeast Asia. Shahir was rapidly initiated into various spiritual modalities, tarot, astrology, and spirit communication in the same shocking yet liberating year when they were planning to pivot their corporate career. They were publicly outed as a member of the LGBTQ community due to their participation in Women's Rights March, and they lost their beloved grandmother from the earthly realm. These origin stories contributed to their unapologetic public embrace and deep learning of Sufism and esotericism. Sufism, I guess, is not Sufism. I apologize that I don't know which. From 2021, their diviner role as a tarot reader and astrologer accelerated as a means of love, passion, and survival in New York City while studying for a master's in human rights. They write on their Substack, Love as Origin, Love as Destination, Love as Intermediacy, and have appeared on multiple astrology and spiritual podcasts with their beloved communities. As a Virgo midheaven ruled by Pisces Mercury, they are here to serve and support our connections with divinity within and without. Thank you so much, Shahir. Shahir will be hosting 2 cohorts for the Magician's Table this year. One will be Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, and one will be at 10 p.m. Eastern. So I'll let all listeners, wherever you live in the world, know where that is for you, and feel into Shahir's voice, feel into this, the energy and the frequency that you are receiving here, and allow yourself to feel into whether you may want to constellate into Shahir's cohort if those times work for you. All right, enjoy our talk. welcome back to Moon, Suprasensory Shahir. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Britain. Thank you for having me again.
Yes. Listeners will remember Shahir was on recently for Unshaming the Third House, one in the Unshaming the Houses series, which was so beautiful.
Oh my god. Yeah, I actually just re-listened to that episode like a few days ago. And then I was like crying. I was
Oh,
like my heart. I was like, wow.
oh my gosh, we just dropped in. You really took us there. I love it when that happens. When you can feel the space opening
hmm
into this new depth, and now you're like really close to the essence of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for playing with me that day because that's my favorite thing. We probably shared there, but I always like to begin remembering how we know each other. And I feel for me, like I started to be aware of you maybe 2021-ish.
hmm
And probably through Jonathan Coe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got to know Jonathan together. We learned evolutionary astrology with Sabrina together, and that's how I got to know Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the overlapping webs that I have in my life with Sabrina Monarch, who listeners will remember from Unshaming the Second House, as well as we did a Pluto and the Nodes episode almost a year ago, which were two of my
Wow.
biggest episodes actually download wise for
Wow, that's amazing.
2024. Sabrina and we always go to juicy places. She loves to go to juicy places. I love it.
Yeah.
You too, Aries sons. Not afraid. Yeah. So, and then you were in Moon to Moon, or well, it used to be called Soft Strength, right?
Mhm.
And that's when I really got to share space with you and feel your presence. So it's following you and just have always appreciated the way you show up in Instagram, especially, I love your lunation reels.
Lunation reels. Yeah, that's something I actually love doing. Just like I actually my process for that is very like I look at the chart and I just wait for the inspiration to come in. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very like almost very quick. Like sometimes if I over plan my lunation reels, I just like I like it ended up being like I don't feel good about releasing it. But then
Yeah.
whenever I trust like that spur of the moment Aries kind of thing, I mean I have a fifth house. My fifth house is in Aries, right? So I always have to trust that. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw that because we have your chart pulled up that you have Venus retrograde
Mm-hmm.
in Aries. Oh my goodness. It's pretty rare to see Venus retrograde. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a special thing. I thought, coming when I was an astrologer, I mean, when I was still learning, I was like, Venus retrograde, that sounds so bad.
Talk about unshaming Venus and Aries, unshaming Venus retrograde. Do you have any words on that on the spot here?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, it is for me, like, it is a very unshamed, unshamed Venus that is unashamed to do anything. So yeah, so for me, it's like being a Venus in Aries retrograde. It's sort of like I'm queer. That's very already like you know going against the grain of whatever society sort of like defined in terms of like love and all those things. And yeah, I think it's kind of interesting where I basically call myself a love devotee, like because of me reclaiming that Venus. Because I was actually really sad, like when I was first learning about astrology, right? And I went through like a lot of the traditional ways of learning, right? And then I was like, oh my god, I'm a night chart. and then my Venus is busted, in my head. Like I was like, she's retrograde, she's so dry, she's under the beams of the sun, right? She's exiled, right? I was like, poor her. But little did I know, right? Actually, that's also like, I don't know, like that seems to be my forte too. Like I seem to really help people. Like one of when I first started doing readings, right? When I was first becoming quote unquote a diviner, I was actually an active love astrologer. Like people keep on coming to me for love readings. It was so wild.
I love this. Did you call them love readings? Like, is in the title, or did you
Not
just have
really. It
what they
was just like
wanted?
I was just like, publicizing in a very general way, like, hey, come to me for a tarot reading, yeah. And then like all the people that kept coming in were on love. And I was like, huh, this seems like a niche that is showing itself. And then like I was kind of like asking my friends around. I was like, do you get readings on love a lot? I mean, like I know those are one of those topics, like hot topics that people would ask about, right? Like if it's love, career, money things or family things and all those things, right? But then I was just like realizing how I was like helping people a lot to solve their relational problems, right? And then I was like, oh wow, that's basically my um Jupiter in Libra, which is also very relational, like ruling, like my Jupiter in Libra, and then that Venus is also helping that Jupiter by ruling by rulership. So yeah, so that was actually how I came sort of like became very much a love related diviner, and even um occasionally I do like relationship readings and I've had a year where I was like doing a lot of it, like doing like even relationship timing readings and things like that with people. And it seemed to really hit. And I always like surprise myself because again, I was like, what is going on with my own love life where I am forecasting for all these people?
Oh, this is so sweet because the theme of the Magician's Table this year, which is what we're here for today, because you are going to be one of the 13th readers this year. Thank
Yes.
you. The
That's an
theme
honor. Thank
is
you for choosing me.
the devotions that are driving you, like this the
Wow.
spirit of what that devotion that is like has its own motor sometimes, it's like can't tell it what
Yeah.
to do. It's the one driving you. Um
Wow. Can you repeat that
and
again? The devotion that is driving you. That's the
yes,
tagline.
yes.
Oh my God. I love that. I love that you're revealing it to me like through this session. Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's just what's been coming through as the heart of this year for me.
Hmm.
Really through a variety of, like, I'm seeing a braid, like there's different braids to why that would be the theme, but um a lot of it I think has to do with how this is kind of a Pluto and Aquarius realization that I've been having, that part of how we sync with our communities, in an Aquarian way. Magician's Table is a very Aquarian space, um,
Mm-hmm.
is through like really getting connected and in relationship with the spirit of the devotion, the spirit of
Mm.
thing that's kind of driving our service and driving our focus and driving our work. And that the more clear we are to the spirit of that, the more magnetic we are to the communities and the webs of other beings that support us in our hopes and dreams and visionary craft, uh, in our time here together.
Mm.
And each of you 13th readers are individuals that I can feel the pulse of that, the frequency of that, the energy of that, and in the way you serve and the way you vocalize and share yourself. And open spaces, forums, in receiving from you. You know that I love receiving your
Thank
prophecy portal
you.
readings. Oh my goodness. And so, but it's funny because I'm just now putting it together that you call yourself a love devotee.
Yeah. I am a love devotee. Yeah. And that really came about from like, I think that was like intentional for me. Even before like realizing my chart in a way, I've always been sort of like been on that path, right? Because in a very classic like fifth houser, like Venus and Sun, I have Sun ruling the ninth house of God. I actually came into spirituality rapidly through the integration of my queerness, actually. Um, it was true, like I've always been very queer and gay, like throughout like college, even when I was working and things like that. But then I always have this sort of like rupture or like complex religious trauma or like religious complex of things. And although like we all some of us out there have probably have felt that as well if you were growing up in very institutionalized sort of like religion, right? um and then I found the Sufi teachings, which is based on love, right? I mean, there are lots of different sects and others when it comes to like the Sufism part of Islam, and there's even a more universal part of Sufism where you don't even need to be a Muslim to call yourself a Sufi, but then that's sort of like a different debate altogether. But whatever, like for me, it's like the crux of it is love. And because of that, it's sort of almost like because of me realizing that, like, oh yeah, I can truly love who I am and my wholeness of my own being and being deeply loving and devoted to God as well. And I don't see those things as separate. And it was kind of like my own sort of like initiation into like being myself even more, even though I have like sort of like I've always felt like I was being myself, it's sort of like, oh, like, but then it's sort of like the I was like a deeper integration to the core of who I am. And that's why I started out calling myself that. It's almost like I proclaiming something that was something that I have always felt a lot in a way. So yeah, so that's how like spirituality and queerness comes into my life, and which is such a like Sun and Venus in the fifth, and that's how I was like, wow, that's kind of like like such like a direct example of my chart even. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so beautiful. I knew that we would just get right there. Yeah. So was astrology part of that self-claiming?
Yeah, I mean, astrology came in a bit later, I would say. I definitely was experiencing, like, when the people say like they were experiencing like a rapid spiritual awakening sort of year. Um, and yeah, that was a year where I was actually publicly outed to the like all like a religious media in Malaysia for participating, like looking very gay and queer, participating in a women's march, which is very Venusian, right? But also like I was like, wow, like, and at that point there was a Pisces Mercury retrograde on my Mercury. I think I forgot, like, but there's a lot of like something was going on during that year with my life, and I was basically like outed to the public because of like being very gay and being very queer, and they sort of like took some people, kind of just like trying to scapegoat certain people, and I was one of those people. um
Weird. That
and
was.
yeah, it's wild. Like during that time, I was like, oh my God. It was kind of interesting because my family kind of knew, but then, but then that was kind of like a point where, oh, now all my cousins knew about it. Like all my, like, religious or conservative extended family knows about it. And then there was a lot of like, the idea of like shame came in. And that's how I sort of like went into like I went to therapy to sort of like figure things out. And I was like, okay, but I needed something more, like to sort of like put things into perspective a bit. And then I found tarot, which was very healing as a modality in terms of like, and at that point, I wasn't even, I'm a Gemini moon, right? I was like very psychological with my tarot at first. I really came into it with like, I need to understand my mind. Like, I need to like talk to myself better. In terms of like because it's a very like therapeutic so tarot was such a therapeutic tool for me actually at first how I came into it and then after that what happened and then after that like spirits start showing up in my tarot readings and I was like huh, what is going on here? Um, and so that led me to a more mystical path. Or although I was already sort of like embracing this sort of like Sufi thing on the side as well, right? Um, and then like astrology is something that is a bit came in a bit later, but I was learning. Like I was religiously watching the astrology podcast. So
Mhm.
props to Chris Brennan. Yeah, I mean, you've been on the astrology podcast too, which is an amazing resource for anyone learning. But yeah, I basically learned through that and I picked up some books and yeah, so and that's what was how I sort of like initiated into astrology.
Oh, I love it. I was an autodidact at the beginning myself, just like finding the books, finding the videos, finding all the resources, and just teaching myself. Um, it's so supportive when you're in a phase of unlearning things about yourself and reweaving who you are.
Yeah, and astrology played an important tool. Definitely, I was, and then I started like obviously the memes are also fun. So I think, yeah, astrology is a more playful because I think there's a lot more, I was like pop astrology content than rather than like pop tarot content, right? It's sort of like pop
Mm.
astrology is sort of like more famous or known, like people create those things more. Um, and then I started appreciating like all the astrology writers like Channy Nicholas, like Alice Barkley Cat. Like I love their sort of like writing and things like that. And then actually like one astrologer writer that I kind of miss has been a while, but I don't know if you know. Do you know Naimonu James?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, there was like a
Ooh.
moment. It's like Naimonu James, like 911 James is such a beautiful astrologer writer. And I think she disappeared for a bit, or she's definitely on her own path. But there was a moment, at least when I was emerging as sort of like, oh, I want to be like, I want to do something with like, I love whatever these people are doing, right?
Mhm.
I was like, obviously, like Chani Nicholas is kind of like one of those people to like, as a queer person, like following Chani. And then I was like reading Alice Barkley Cat posts. And then I remember like, specifically when it comes to like lunation things, like I remember that Naimonu James always had like this beautiful writings that I was kind of like in love with. I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna like take this to heart. And I'm just gonna like read it like almost like a mantra. And that's how like sort of like even for me, when I try to create my own lunation reels, I sort of like I sort of like, all right, this is something I want people to sort of like know about um illumination. And it's sort of like I do have a very deep relationship with my luminaries actually. I do um I do think I do like my chart has that like luminary privilege. Right?
Uh-huh,
Some
the
people would say.
sextile.
Yeah, it's a perfect sextile, and by degree, and the moon is applying to the sun, right? I was born 3 to 4 days after the Eid celebration like in Muslim culture. So after the fasting month, I was born during the Eid month, which is considered like a celebratory month. Um, and I was actually born the night of my parents were having a open house, like they were hosting people. It's kind of bizarre, and my chart has that sort of like party signature. Not gonna lie.
Signature. I love it.
Yeah, like this is one way for I like if like listeners listening to this, right? One way to like look at your chart, which is I know this is perhaps something um sacred, or maybe the information is not readily accessible for you, if people, you know, with regards to how they came into being, right? But to those who have access to that information, really ask your parents, or how like your birth parents, whatever have you, like how did you come about, like what was going on that day, right? And
Yeah.
that's actually an interesting story. Like that is like for me that day itself, I mean it's your birthday, right? Like you kind of want to know what was going on a bit of like perhaps the day before or the day of your birthday. um yeah.
Oh, I love this. Yeah, it's a perfect sextile. I have that too, but mine is the it's a disseminating moon. The other way.
Oh, oh yeah. Oh wow. Wow. So we kind of like have that. Oh wow, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, yeah. So I do consider like I that's why I think I do love the sun and moon as sort of like you know the likes in the chart, right? And the idea that like I have an angular Gemini moon, which is also the leader of my sec light, um you know, in the seventh house. And then I have an exalted sun, although it's a night sun, which I think it does tempers down my Aries in some ways. Like I think I some people, whenever some people get to know me, they sometimes are surprised that I am an Aries, but then people who are really close to me, they're like, oh yeah,
They're
you
not
are.
surprised. My goodness. Something I've been wanting to ask you,
Mhm.
because the readings I've received from you were both asynchronous and they were both tarot based, but also extremely channeled. Like, it was very clear that the cards were just a jumping off point for you to be seeing things in
Yeah.
the deep divination space. So I'm curious how you've moved through the process of, deciding, this is going to be asynchronous, this will be live, this will be combining these modalities. This one, I'm not going to do that modality. Like as someone who's multi-modality,
Hmm.
like it's one of the sayings in magician's table lore, my modality is me.
Oh my God, my modality is me. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I've never actually received an astrology reading from you. But how do you discern? And I imagine this changes over time.
Hmm.
How to package or put together your different readings, but
Hmm.
and the gift.
Yeah, yeah, the asynchronous one, the prophecy portal was interesting because I had like multiple iterations of it. And I think it was only the third one, if I'm not mistaken, was when I started doing it, or maybe even the second one. But I know the first version was a live version. And then I was just feeling like it felt good, but then I was like, you know what? Like I like there's a part of me that was also wanting to challenge myself a bit, right? Because whenever we're doing like a year ahead reading, um it is like purely forecasting, right? In a way, like you are like, all right, what would be a good channel? And then there was a year I integrated astrology a bit, but it wasn't like doesn't feel like as generative for me, because I ended up feeling like I have to do a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, right. And so yeah, and that point, and that's how sort of like I like I was like, yeah, this one feels more comfortable for me to sort of like do it on my own. And I don't know why, like sometimes I'm very aware, like having that awareness of do I need to talk to someone about this? Or
Yes.
and it's that right, like I think that's kind of like part of it. As much as there is beauty in lively conversation, right? um but there's also a beauty in sort of like someone really trusting you to sort of like read for them, and they are just like
Yes.
in this sort of like pure receiving mode, because I've been that person too, and I love that, right? Like I've been on the receiving end of certain like just recorded readings for me, for myself, and I was like, oh yeah, I really like love that as sort of like a piece. And so that's how, like, because I appreciated that form, I kind of I wanted that, a version of that for myself. And so that's how the prophecy portal thing was, um like, it's sort of like had its life on its own. And not gonna lie, like every year is always like sold out, and alhamdulillah, like always people, it's always like energetically I always feel like, I don't care about this. Like I was someone that, not like not caring, as like I really trust that like whoever that's meant to receive that thing, right, they'll just come in, right, they'll just like pick it up and receive it for that particular year. So yeah, it took a little bit of experimentation at first, but then yeah, I'm at a point where I was like, yeah, this is a process I love doing. It also gives me sort of like the flexibility even more to trust my own timing, because actually one thing about me, even with I don't want to say this on like the podcast, but maybe let's just unshame this, right? um I'm not afraid to like reschedule my clients at times. And the reason why is because I sometimes just have a feeling that something isn't good, or like something just like tells me like, Shahir, just reschedule the reading. And like
Hmm.
actually I put that as a policy in my, like, I actually had that in my terms and condition. I said that I sometimes will do that. And so what I give to my clients is that whenever something happens to their life, I actually allow that for them as well. Um,
Yes.
and I love that spaciousness, because there was a time where I was going against that, and I was like, oh my God, like I did not like the reading I gave.
I know. I wonder, I'm really the same way. We both have Pisces Mercuries.
Yeah.
Like I remember early in my practice, I was in like a business clock container for mystical people, and
Mm-hmm.
we were encouraged to have tighter boundaries about reschedules and things like this. And it was like, yeah, I'm gonna tighten my boundaries. And then I realized, like, this is actually not me. Like, I'm fine with reschedules. They're magical. They're really magical.
They're really magical.
And like, can't we just like, it's fine,
It's
okay.
fine.
We'll just,
It's fine. We'll just find
I'm
another time.
always gonna
Time is
have another
expensive.
thing. Yeah, I'm always gonna enjoy the extra time that I suddenly was given, if somebody reschedules. And
Yeah.
some big thing that's gonna come through. I trust that. And like
Exactly.
it's meant to
Exactly.
be. So,
Exactly.
oh
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
unshaming
Some
these
people
people.
say, yeah, I love that we relate that. Yeah, it's definitely that is definitely a Piscean effect, and really like, yeah, like I do know. And when I learned Jyotish, because I was like learning the Vedic astrology, I do like, apparently, yeah, like my Mercury is in the nakshatra of like Shatabishak, which is like in parts of Pisces. I mean tropical Pisces, but in Jyotish, in sidereal it's Aquarius. And it has a lot to do with that. Like it has a lot to do with understanding the cosmic law. It's sort of like you just know when it's not the time yet.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a weird thing where like sometimes I tell people that, and you're like, and then like, I tell, like some of my friends would be like, how do you know? And I was like, no, I just know it's not the time yet. And
Did you
this
just
also
feel
comes
it?
in, and this is also a thing for me when it comes to sort of electional astrology, right? Which I respect and revere all my colleagues who are doing electional things, right? But then I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, that's a great chart, but I don't think that's for me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know how like people would like find beautiful auspicious charts and things like that, and like I don't like, I'm not trying to discredit their work, whatever have you, but I do know that maybe certain people's placement are also like perhaps attuned to a different wavelength or what frequencies or whatever have you, right? And like sometimes when you know something is not for you, you don't sort of like, you don't go there, like, you know, sort of like that, sort of like the awareness of the your own personal mystical space actually. um and it sort of like the image that conjures up to my head was sort of like, you know, the old school or like priestess or shamans or mystics, whatever have you, right? They actually like boundaries is actually about staying in your circle. It's sort of
Mhm.
like, it's really about staying in your circle, and sort of like that's sort of like a meaning of it, meaning that you're not trying to mold yourself to fit into other people's sort of like circles, right? You're sort of like, I'm gonna stay in my circle and really celebrate it, and whoever that's meant to come in, they will be there, and will our circles will interact. um but then yeah, and so that's why, that's how I truly learn. Like I do have some sort of like a deep devotion when I learn about like a new modalities, or even like nakshatra system, the lunar mansion framework and things like that. And so there's always this sort of like a spiritual idea, and I think that's sort of like the awareness of the cosmic timing awareness that I really love about my own practice. And that is why I'm sort of like, yes, like on the tiniest things, it's sort of like it comes up through like scheduling. Right? If you need to schedule, there must be something that's trying to intervene, right? Like, hey, and then if I need to schedule, it's really about me trusting that my circle is not available for you right now, right? It's sort of like, yes, you booked my time, but we're equal here, right? um and so that's also why like I love that. I love that freedom. Like it also gives us a spaciousness of like trust. And that's also why I love doing the asynchronous reading, like the recorded reading too, so
Me
that I can
too.
stay in my circle. And in my magic circle, I call in the energies that's, you know, good for you, the best for you, in terms of the prophecy part and whatever messages that I'm trying to channel in the space. Yeah, and then I just do that, right? I trust that. And it, at first it feels kind of bizarre. Like when I first started doing the prophecy portal, I kept on like, you know, there's a sort of like, I realized when I was like listening, I was like, oh yeah, like I kept on trying to like ask the other person whether it makes sense to them. And then like over the years, I was kind of like realizing, oh, I actually started like asking that less from the other person. And it takes a lot of like perhaps like a sense of spiritual sovereignty as well to really know that that's okay. Like if that person resonates with it, they'll receive it. If they don't, they also just like put it aside or something like that. Right? I don't constantly have to sort of like assure the other person or like asking them for a feedback, or you know, that sort of like,
Yes.
oh, which is beautiful on its own in its other framings. But then like when it comes to trusting your own inner voice and your own like inner authority, and whatever that you're channeling, whatever your gifts, I think at the end of the day, we're, you know, the mystical space for each and every one of us, we're all gifted, right, in multiple ways, and through multiple voices and modalities as well. So really like listening to the voice of your own craft is what is important. Yeah.
Oh gosh. I love this picture of the circle that you've brought in here. It resonates
Yeah.
so much. I mean, we're unlearning and separating ourselves from like customer service doctrine, you know, and
Hmm.
that sense of like schedules and like being a responsible adult means not rescheduling, you know, or and you know, giving the paying client, you know, what they asked for, which was that time, you know, when you
Mhm.
know that part of what you're being paid for is your listening ability and being able to
Mhm.
listen to that timing. I love
Yeah.
so much that you brought this into here because it does feel like one of the gifts of the mystical pathway is to um reframe our relationship to timing and reclaim the sovereignty
Mm.
around that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Truly, yeah, truly that's yeah, like really trusting and reclaiming that for yourself. And yeah, and it really gives that sense of like spaciousness too, in multiple ways, right? And even even if as a person who feels like, oh my God, do I need to constantly create something, right? I don't have to do that, right? Um, if and that's also like, you know, time and creation process sort of like comes in as well, when it comes to sort of like, oh, listening, and you know, when I was the thing that I was like trying to process with you too, when you dropped the your voice note, right? And then literally a few days before that, I was having an illumination that, yeah, I think I am phasing out my full birth chart reading that I've been doing for the past 4 years. And that felt like I was actually praying at that time
Wow.
at the mosque praying, and then suddenly like that inspiration comes in, and then I was like, okay, I receive this, I'll sit with it later, and I finish my prayer, my Friday prayer at that time. And then I was just like sitting at the mosque for a bit, and I was like, okay, are we really releasing this, right? um and that's sort of like something that I've been doing for the past 4 years, like really reading people like the full birth chart is a pretty it's something I enjoy doing. Like I go by like houses. Like, you know, it's sort of like very Virgo midheaven of me to sort of like I went like I weave like all the different houses together. Like, okay, your placement is here. Like we begin at the rising sign, and then we look at the where the ascendant ruler is, and then we look at whichever house is next. We look at the yada yada houses, right? Like all those, like it's very process based of a reading, which I enjoyed. I'm not trying to say, like some people do that too, right? When it comes to a birth chart. And then I was just really feeling deeply that I don't want to be reading like that anymore. And it was kind of like hard at first, sort of like, you know, that part of us that scares you a little bit.
I
And then
know.
like the fear is so real that I was like, okay, but not my other readings, right? Like I still love doing my birthday ones. Like please, like, it's sort of like you're sort of like trying to hold on to whatever that is like, because like my birthday one is also quite popular. People come in for like the solar return ones. That's also something I enjoy. From time like, but that one, the client base is pretty like sort of like controlled a bit because but yeah, like I was potentially so the full birth chart one was really feeling that, yeah, I'm really phasing out that one. But then over this past few days, what happened was that I had a client, I had a return client who came in, and I was like doing this like purely like a transit, just like looking at the transit of the moment of this person. And I would like we jive so well. I was like, wow, this could be the new offering that I'm trying to like put out. I'm still in the process of like perhaps like thinking about it even more. Because I already have something quite similar, but I think it's some like evolving the language or the intentions a bit regarding that. So yeah, like I was just looking at the transit chart, looking at the chart of that person, and then we were talking about like poison transmutation. We were talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about like healing things, traumatic things, like bonding things. Like a lot of conversations right now are regarding the Mars in Cancer, retrograde, right? Which I've been calling it sort of like, yeah, there's something about the Mars in Cancer is actually about transmuting the poison that actually is in your body. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's sort of like it's really and you don't and you sort of like we have this idea that we need to fight the poison, but a fallen Mars is not a fighter. It is a fighter, but it's not like a strength sort of like fighter. Like it's not like by like, oh, I'm gonna fight this poison through my body, whatever, right? It's really about like really like sort of like allowing the waters, allowing it to sort of like pass through you um through your body, and it sort of like heals itself, right? It's sort of like we move on by not holding on to it. So I was like, yeah, like was having a lot of images around poison and transmuting poison with the Mars in Cancer sort of like retrograde. I was talking a lot about it in my past two sessions. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Listeners don't know that I just like close my eyes listening to that, just really feeling it. We both have Mars and Cancer. I need to get one of these transit readings, apparently. Um, oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, it's I feel like when an offering shows up to be released or composted, it's like there's so many feelings that can come up.
Hmm.
And but it's a it's like trusting that some other thing is gonna come forward.
Yeah.
It sounds like maybe that's it, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. Like they kind of have their own life. It feels like to me these offerings.
Yeah, and really, I think it's sort of like what helps me a lot, um, because I do feel that I am a person that sort of like my chart has Moon and Ketu conjunction, which I do love releasing. Like I do love but sometimes you're just like, oh my god, like like is this a precious thing? I don't want to let it go, right? But yeah, and usually when you release something, it's sort of like it creates space for you to do something else, right? I always like see that as sort of like, yeah, releasing is actually a ritual of making space for something new, and that whatever that new thing is doesn't necessarily arrive instantaneously. It could, right? But sometimes whenever someone's having a more Saturnian transit, it might delay a bit or might take its time, right? But that's okay too. And I love one of those the Sufi teachings which I really love, trusting is really trusting the truth in each moment. It's very
Mm.
Jupiter and Gemini too. It's like sort of like really honoring the truth of each moment, and that truth is also changing, right? Which is sort of like Jupiter loves the big T sort of like truth thing, right? It's sort
Yep.
of like, oh, this is the universal truth thing, right? But then if we really take the pieces of it, which is such sort of like very mercurial way of processing of sort of like, yeah, what is the truth of each moment of this time, right? And so yeah, the truth of this current time is that I'm being asked to release it, right?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
Jupiter and Gemini. You just gave me a reading. There I am. Oh my God. That's so beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so in the Magician's Table, as you know, you're going to be partnering each week with a different magician from your
Hmm.
cohorts. And you have two
Yes.
cohorts. And
Oh my God. I'm excited for both of them.
so I imagine part of the intelligence of seeing what offerings are being composted may also be related to the fact that there's going to be an offering that starts to emerge or multiple
Hmm.
across the magician's table, because that's why
Yeah.
it's a workshop. It's to workshop the emergent offering. that from the
Yes.
practice of being consistently with others in
Yeah.
community.
Yeah, that would be a beautiful experimentation, and even like, you know, I might be changing up things because like, yeah, I like one thing, you know, I this is a perhaps a more planner side of me, because I know you already say like, yeah, just like, you know, the workshop things with the partnering things with people week to week um will probably be fluid, and we'll see what emerges. But then, you know, my like the planner inner self of me already like, oh yeah, I'm probably gonna be using the sort of like the framework of like, because recently I like last year I launched the fellowship of the astrologers kind of thing, right?
Yes,
Where
I remember that.
yeah, sort of like I know those skills would be useful, but I was also like, but I don't want to be holding on to that only, right? Because I had an offering last year. I had one round of cohorts where I was basically like it's like a peer advisory session of me looking at someone's birth chart. I look at their seventh house, eighth house. I look at their 10th and 11th houses as well. I look at the 9th and the 3rd house as the diviner dexterity sort of like houses, the 7th and the 8th house as the collaborator value houses, and then the 10th and the 11th as a more fluid public image kind of like houses, right? Um, and so I was trying to like help my friends out in the sphere of not to say like that's like a marketing thing, whatever have you, but really sort of like, all right, let's tune in into the magic of your own birth chart. And I love those exchanges within it because it's sort of like hits so well for them, and it has been sort of like generative for their own thing, and they've been sort of like flourishing on its own too. And I love that. I actually, you know, one secretly about me is that sometimes I don't care. I don't give a fuck if you don't come back to me.
I love
Like
it.
my I part of my like I know my role so much that sometimes like my role is just to like really interface with the client. Like you just need a reading with me one time, and that's good. If that's good, it's going to be lasting in terms of its
Yes.
impact on you, right? And that's okay, right? And that's also another thing which I think maybe I'm a bit like like of course as a business person you want people to come back, like you're like, oh, you're not thinking about return clients. It's not that I don't think about them, I care about them, but like I care like my clients do. I really want them to live out their life, go good, just do whatever you're meant to be doing, right? But like I also trust the sort of like especially from observing my own practice over the past years, since 2020 and 20, like even with tarot and 2021, like I tend like I whenever I try to like ask for people to return, it feels kind of it doesn't feel like me, you know. It's always when people come back to me naturally. I love that, right? And so I don't really sort of like, yeah, part of my practice is that like people will return, but like I don't mind if you don't. Like really, like I don't even only sometimes I would have like some rates preferential, sort of like, you know, giving them discounts or whatever have you. But usually I would have appreciated more of like, okay, if you want it, you just reach out to me. I have it, right? But it's not like I'll tell you that, hey, there's a return session available, because I don't feel like that's me, you know?
Yes. And it's like this is mystical business because it also supports the contract between you and the client that they're totally sovereign and free, you know?
Yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And because yeah, one time someone asked me, "Oh, do you have a return sessions rate?" And I was like, "Huh, I don't think I want to do that." And it feels so evil. Like in my like, there's a part of me that like, are you not thinking strategically about this? Right? It's like quote unquote, right? It's and I was like, no, it's like if I don't really like, unless like it's sort of like it's sort of like interesting too. And this is why, you know, the idea of like the truth in each moment, right? It's sort of like, all right, does this feel aligned for me to be accepting? And that's kind of like coming back to the idea of like the circle thing, right? It's sort of like
Yes.
I don't want to like I and also I've had this experiences in the past, especially as when I was sort of like starting out, right? Ooh, like sometimes the client work can also get very dependent, right? I've had to
Yes.
block clients too. Right?
Wow.
And so I was like, I've had to tell a client one time that, hey, I don't want to see you for the next 6 months because you already came into my sphere like 3 times over this 3 months, like almost every month already.
You're yeah.
And as
Yeah.
much as I loved our interaction and doing business with you, right? And it's sort of like the exchanges, but at some point I just felt like, hey, I feel like I'm in a sphere where this is where like that's the awareness I was feeling too. I was like, I feel like I'm cross, like it's almost like I'm teetering a line a bit. I was like, huh, like I don't want to feel this sort of like um where we don't feel sovereign in ourselves, right? And suddenly this client just kept on showing up and showing up. And I told them off. I was like, hey, like respectfully, I potentially needed some space from you rebooking me. And they received it openly. I mean, obviously there are some cases where I never saw them again, like never see them again. That's fine, right? But yeah, so actually, and that's fine too, right? It's if you're, I think as someone who's just starting out and wanting to know your own style, I think your style also finds you in your own
Mm.
path, right?
In the doing it.
In doing it, yeah, like you never know, like the same with the establishing the tight rescheduling, right? Oh, if you reschedule, you have to pay this or blah 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 blah, right? La, 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 right? It's sort of like, oh, once you start putting it, and you're like, that's not how I want to operate it. That feels a bit off for me, and that's okay, right? Other people can do it. Um, and so yeah, you learn as you go, as they say. But yeah, like that's definitely something I would say like any emerging readers out there probably will feel along their journey. It's like, I don't want to do this client anymore, or like, I want to do
Yeah.
more of this, I don't want to do less of that, right? It's all like this beautiful and messy process of creation and, yeah, and mystical sort of like creations with others.
Yeah, it feels like it really comes back to this circle that you've brought in here. Um, just holding to what you need inside your circle is how you can best be of service.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
You. So, thank you so much for your yes to the magician's table this year. Just speaking with you today, I'm so excited for the magicians that they are going to be able to learn with you, hang out with you, receive readings with you, and be in your love devotion frequency, this mystical frequency that you hold so dearly and sincerely.
Wow. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm actually as yeah, excited and to be really open to this experience. And it's kind of wild. I do think now, I remember when Jonathan was actually the 13th reader, I wanted to sign up, and I think that's why I opted for the soft strength one. Because I
Oh.
so that was actually the year that I was like, this feels like something I want to do one day. And then I don't know, life just goes on. And I took the soft strength one, for sure, because I was studying in New York at that time, and it's like I was a grad student, like trying to like I trusted my limits of financials at that time, and it doesn't feel like okay, like realistically, I can't do this yet, right? Um, and now I'm in here as a 13th reader, so yeah, my heart just feels so expanded when you invited me to have me as a 13th reader, and thank you so much for trusting me to be in the space. And I'm actually, yeah, I'm a forever student, right? As a Gemini moon Virgo midheaven person, I'm a forever sort of like student, as much as I loved teaching my peers as well. So yes, I am excited for this round of um, the cohorts that I'll be with, and also everyone. Yeah,
Yes. Thank you so much, Shahir.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Shahir. I so enjoyed our conversation. Listeners, inviting you to follow Shahir on Instagram. And if you're feeling called to the Magician's Table, inviting you to consider whether you are able to attend one of Shahir's cohorts. So they're leading, this is Eastern Standard Time, so that seems like the one that most of us can turn ourselves towards to understand, like, where's my time zone related to Eastern. It's a 9:30 a.m. Eastern and a 10 p.m. Eastern. So for Shahir, that's Wednesday evening and then Thursday morning. So, yes, those cohort meetups are, I'll speak a little bit about the Magician's Table now. Those cohort meetups are 90 minutes. And if when you join the Magician's Table, they're 90 minutes, and these cohort meetups are one of the two required ways that you show up in the Magician's Table. Y'all know that a lot of my containers are asynchronous or they are attendance optional. Like I'm super into learning as a student that way, and I'm into teaching that way. But the Magician's Table is an experience that is really about showing up and bringing yourself into space with others. And the most important thing that you're learning to do is to show up no matter what. It's like kind of the main thing that's happening is you're being reconstituted to understand that showing up is not about showing up perfectly, that you can show up however you are, and then actually showing up as you are in your vulnerability, in whatever kind of day it is that you're having, is the power of your presence, and the power of your presence is where your power is. So the Magician's Table is an intensive space because it requires you to show up week after week. So these cohort meetups, the time really needs to work because, like, if you're traveling a week or like you have a conflict, one or two of those, we can work around that, but you have to be able to commit to just about all of them. Ideally, you don't miss any. It's really, really felt when someone doesn't come. So the cohort meetup is one of the two requirements. The other requirement is that you partner each week exchanging readings with someone in your cohort. It's a different person each week, and you will also be exchanging with your 13th reader. So if you're in Shahir's cohort, you will receive a reading from Shahir, and you will give Shahir a reading, as you will with all of your classmates. And there's 1 week off that's like a bye week, so that you get a break. And yes, you can request certain weeks to be a bye week if you know in advance, like that week you are not spacious. And because of the rigor of this, and because people do have hard weeks, that is part of life, it also helps rewire your the parts of you that think you can't show up unless you have like hours and hours to prepare and unless you like feel perfectly ready. You get to breaking points where you're forced to see that like the power of your medicine comes through you, not from your hours and hours of preparing. And this allows you then to trust the emergent presence that you always can bring to anything, so that you can actually like do more than you think you can. You actually can, you don't have to have the readiness that the protector parts of you think you have to have in order to hold a lot of things or to show up emergently, even when you're having like a busy week. And this is not in the spirit of like work harder, do more. This is actually from a really mystical perspective that at any moment, emergently, it's already actually here. And it's not from our analytical brain's ideas about readiness. So those are the two requirements. And, you know, one of the benefits is you're receiving every week. You're receiving readings. And then when you have your cohort meetups, one of the things that everyone does is pass the mic around and share about their experience of receiving. So you get to find out each week what it was like for someone to receive from you. The rule on these is only cheerleading. It's not a space for like suggestions or feedback. You know, the world gives us enough of this, and so does our inner critic. So week after week after week, you get to experience what it was like for someone to receive the beauty, the dignity, the sweetness of your craft. And that has really huge effects on us. So after that, as you can read about at the course page, there's a whole lot else that's available to you in the Magician's Table, but everything is optional based on like what you have space for and capacity for. But the partnering and the weekly cohort meetup are required. For some folks, that is all that can be managed, and that is like life-changing medicine already. For others, it's like there's always hunger for more. Like, give me more, give me more, give me more. And part of what we're doing in this space is holding our own magical circle and learning that everybody is choosing their own curriculum. Everybody's on their own journey, even as we're doing all of this together. And that's like a very mystical way of relating in the world that's so fucking supportive and healing for us who've all been conditioned with comparison and competition in ways that are not nourishing, in ways that are harmful, and like basically a massive, massive waste of our energy. So if you're feeling it, I'm looking forward to receiving your application. The early bird pricing for TMT this year is available for applications that come in February 14, 15, and 16 weekend. The application has to drop in one of those 3 days to be considered for the lower price point. The only way to apply that weekend is to be on the TMT waitlist. All the buttons at the course page put you on the wait list. Yes, it puts you on my mailing list, but if you're already on my mailing list, you are not on the wait list. The only way to get on the wait list is to put your name on the wait list, whether you're on my mailing list or not. This is also the only way to apply for a scholarship. So there is no obligation to apply if you're on the wait list. But the only way to have the option for the discounted pricing is to be on the wait list. So please get on the wait list if you're curious, if you're thinking about it, if you want the right to apply for the lower price point. And then the truth is, I never know what's going to happen. Some years it fills up super fast. Some years it's a slower fill up. I just say this because it's different than my other containers where I don't have limits. I guess I have limits on my group coaching, but I haven't had to use them yet because we just tend to always fill to like right where the limit is. But in this case, because cohorts are only 12 people, that's it. And they need to be 12. It's like a hardcore magical process for me to like manifest a number. It's like way harder than not caring how many people come, you know? So it's a real practice for me. And so it's super magical. Everyone who's meant to come will come. I just never know exactly how the timing of that's going to play out. You know, a lot of it also depends on collective energy, like the collective interest in like saying yes to things, the collective wave of trusting in action, you know? So we'll just see how this year goes. There has been a lot of collective freeze, you know, with the liminal between election and inauguration. But just keep in mind that it's very likely that some, if not all of the cohorts will fill early bird weekend. And so if you want the right to come at all, and you want to be able to say, like, I can only do this cohort time. If you can only do one particular cohort time, even if you're happy to pay me more money, like sometimes I waive early bird because I'm like, I just don't know yet. I don't care about the discount because I need to come to my clear yes. Yeah, I understand that could be the case. However, if you only can do one cohort that's available, you need to get your application in so that you can secure your spot, you know? If you don't care about the discount and you can do lots of different cohorts, then it's less risky and you're maybe fine waiting. Anyway, I'm going to stop on that note and say, I hope you'll join me for the next couple of conversations with the other two 13th readers. Come receive their wisdom. And I hope you will find inspiration, find nuggets to support you in your mystical journey, in your mystical pathways, whether you come to the magician's table or not this year. All right. Sending everyone a big hug, and I will see you at the next one. Cheers.